they're not digging it by hand.
Okay, well,
I assume.
anyways, I was like, just be gentle on my flower beds, man, because I don't mind raking and leveling, going back in the spring. And,
Yeah.
But, hey, Patrick, as much as possible, I'd like to see something. I got geraniums in there and a few other perennials. It'd be kind of cool if they popped up. If not, that's
if it gets destroyed,
What's up?
we'll just replace them in our order.
Yeah, it's not that big of an area, and I can always put annuals in it, which I don't mind doing, but I did put some stuff in the clay that was on the left side.
I love that ratio.
And it-
I do it on this now, I
Post
had city
holes,
council
and
fix
then I
it,
put
where
it
I
on
put the
those.
people in,
Okay.
and
That's
then
gonna take,
tells me.
a lot of
Nice.
organic matter and churning it through that.
Get us all in very.
And I don't mind doing the elbow grease and doing it with a shovel, I don't know.
No, we've got till.
Anyways, that's.
Take us 20 minutes.
No, I'm feeling that
Okay.
picture's my page.
Well,
We would just
thank
go up there and just,
Well, just won't prompt you
Yeah.
to like.
and then we would throw stuff on top of it and turn it in.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make the flower beds a little more sustainable. But, I enjoy going over there and experimenting. But I, in my mind, that the one side where we did the biochar, it did look more robust, the flowers and stuff.
Biochar is great for clay.
Yeah.
It's
So,
great. Yeah.
Maybe it's my imagination, but I thought it looked good year one.
I used to always make my own.
Yeah,
Where I used to work.
maybe Englewood ought to get into the business, make its own biochar.
We were out in the country, so we could just set fires.
You could just do it the old fashioned way.
Without anybody caring. I think
Well,
the fire department might get upset if there's
Spraying water on
coming
it.
from the
Yeah.
service center.
Okay.
It produces a lot of smoke.
Yeah, if you ever get a chance, you ought to go up to, the plant up off of 25.
Yeah, I read about the company.
You'd be fascinated. I mean, it's very impressive. They have these big kilns and, huge piles of wood from the beetle kill and stuff from the
Yeah.
forest. And, I think they're a viable business. They've been around now for a few years.
Yeah, they can market it correctly.
Yeah.
Get it to the right places. I mean,
Mike, I think we're good.
Are we ready? I'm sorry.
You're good.
It's showtime. Okay. All right. Let's start with the minutes. Maybe Patrick will start at your end and we'll just go around the table here and then catch the folks that have called in.
Roll call. Patrick Fitzgerald, member, present.
Thanks. Michael Chisholm, present.
Bill England present,
Logan Dunning, present.
Lana Garcia present. And then folks online, do we want to start with Tracy?
Tracy Sabina, member present.
Tim Holt, Park Supervisor, present.
Hi, Jim.
Shelley?
Dana Lieber, present.
Kelly Oren, member, present.
Okay. We have an agenda, or I'm sorry, a quorum?
Yes, yep.
Okay,
Quorum.
thank you, everybody. So we did roll call and welcome guests. And is Tim going to speak as well?
yeah, if you would like.
Great. So welcome to our meeting. Let's go with the minutes. Reviewing of last month's minutes. Do we have any corrections, modifications, changes? I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve last month's minutes.
We have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. So moved. Okay, public forum. Is there anybody from the public that wants to address the commission, bring any items to our attention? Don't believe so? Okay,
Oh,
thank
wait, I
you.
think Dana went off mute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think Dana went off mute. I just want to make sure
Oh,
we're
okay.
not passing her.
Hi,
Hi,
I
Dan.
emailed, hi, Michael. I emailed you my comments about the tree ordinance.
And so Dana emailed you and I looped in Evan about comments for the tree ordinance.
I didn't, when did you send them, Dana?
Recently.
I'm sorry,
No problem. Mel has them.
Okay. So, do you have anything you want to share at the moment, or you just want to wait and hear what Evan has to say?
I'll wait.
Okay, very good. Anybody else from the general public out there? Okay, we're going to move on to upcoming tasks and events.
Oh, we're doing standing community projects. Sorry, I think that was my fault. Oh, we're doing standing community
Yeah.
projects first.
Yeah, that's where I was
Yep,
going to go.
yep.
Okay, so standing committee projects, updates. Logan, we're going to start with you.
That's right.
Take the
Yeah, I can
floor.
take this. So we were not able to meet as a subcommittee, so I'm bringing magazine content ideas in front of the full commission. Hopefully the discussion doesn't go too much further than the 5 minutes we had allotted. So I think this was circulated to the subcommittee today. If y'all had a chance to take a look at these ideas, so please chime in. But in no particular order, I wanted to discuss 6 to 7 different content ideas to pitch to the communications department for the spring magazine, which will go to print late January, for context. Before we dive into these content ideas, what was highlighted in the winter magazine was the Sustainable Business Partnership, followed by fall aeration, dormant seeding, and plant trimming, of which I believe the latter 3 we all approved as a commission last quarter. So jumping into some ideas, please just open conversation. The first bullet I had was putting compost to good use. I think, coming out of the winter, we all have plenty of bagged leaves, either from our gutters or from our yards or, whatever. And compost builds up over the winter months. And it was an idea of how can we advise the general public to put these materials to good use, which could transition into my next bullet, which is starting a garden. I immediately just think water conservation efforts, irrigation, things like that. So those are the first 2. Tracy, chime in anywhere about composting. Third, and Mel, I'd like some feedback from you on this. I don't know if we can highlight the Parks Bond as a commission or if we want to. I just know within the bond, there's quite a bit of money going toward infrastructure replacement and improvement, a lot of water conservation in there, a lot of focus on parks space improvement, native plants, things like that. If that is a space for us to cheer it on or spotlight it, then that's an idea that came to mind as well.
Tim, do you know if we're allowed to do that or not, or is that like and also maybe that is something that's already going in the magazine, I'm not sure.
Yeah, we'll start to spotlight some of these things once we get more along in the bond process. We're so early on that we're a little hesitant to mention anything right now.
Thanks, Tim. No problem. Let's see. I had, tree ordinance. I wanted to be thoughtful about, it might be early to highlight that since we're still discussing it as a commission. It's not been formally rolled out. It has been in front of council, my understanding, and it's been revisioned. So we might want to wait, but I would take feedback on the timeline for that to see if we want to spotlight something like that. That's been good work done on our behalf. I've got a few more things. Volunteer opportunities, Tracy spoke to some efforts ongoing at Bard Park. I don't know if those are still ongoing, but I think there should always be space to highlight where folks can get engaged and plugged in. I think of Bard and I think of Depot. We've got Dana on right now. I volunteered at both, and I think those are great opportunities for the general public to come and get their hands dirty. Lastly, I just had a bullet for anti-idling. Since this drops late January, we're going to be in the thick of winter. I didn't know if we wanted to have a box of for just an FAQ, the detriments, how to avoid anti-idling in the morning, why you should, things like that. And then I had Mel, city partnerships to highlight, and maybe we can address that toward the end of the meeting tonight. So that's what I had. I was just spitballing. thoughts, priority lists, what sticks, what jumps out, what am I missing?
It's a really good list. I like the idea of following up with the winter compost,
Yeah,
just because
okay.
it was in this magazine, right? The drop off or,
Hey,
I don't remember.
Tracy has her hand raised, she might know.
But I like kind of following through with that.
Kind of just, yeah, I agree with that. Let's see what this was. I thought I remember seeing that in this magazine too.
I thought I did too.
Tracy, was composting in this most recent magazine?
It's in that right there. So it's not necessarily like compost flat out, but it's what to do with your yard trimmings, and everything. So it's, yeah, I think there was compost as like part of an option.
Cool. I really do like the idea of continuity.
Yeah.
Pulling it through a couple, just repetition, I think is really key for folks. So
Yeah.
I would be on board with something, with bumping that up in the priority list. Tracy?
Yeah, I really like the segue from the composting into like how to start a garden, like in soil health, because that's kind of a big thing right now for gardeners, is kind of how are you preserving your soil and getting your gardens ready. So I think that would be a great thing to add.
My question about that is, are people doing that in January, February? I don't know.
Well, I mean, as Logan said, with all the yard waste, all of that can be utilized for getting your gardens ready for spring. So if they're looking for ways to utilize their yard waste instead of, putting it into the trash, that would be kind of a good spotlight, because right now is a great time to start thinking about how to build that soil health for your gardens, and then also native plant landscapes and all of that.
We definitely are. We are putting our food compost in we cut our plants back, 2 months ago? And I'll do a layer of bagged leaves, food compost, and kind of layer it after every snow. I don't know if that's actually the best way to do it, but it's worked for us.
Okay,
That's what we're doing
that
already.
makes sense.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
I like the idea of educating, talking, and promoting composting. I think that's important. I also like the idea of perhaps a hands-on demonstration or hands-on teaching opportunity.
Mhm.
For example, at the urban garden over by Depot Park.
Yep.
I have a little plot over there. And last spring, there was a fella who's involved, like Debbie would know who I'm talking about. He's the master compost guy. And we've got 3 big bins
Yep.
of early, middle, late. And every year in the spring, he asks people to come in and we start sifting and we take fresh compost, put it in the plots. Particularly for people that are just getting into this, to actually see it and talk to an expert. Say, well, how long does this take? And why do you put this material and not that material? Should you put dog poop in there or not? I mean, those are real questions that need answers. But to touch it or to see it take place would be cool. And I know there's experts within the city who could do it, and there's probably volunteers within the urban gardens who could do it. But it'd be a demonstration. And it could be 20 minutes long. It doesn't have to be. But maybe you could walk home with a bag of compost. It's like, oh, this is what it's supposed to look like. But they do a very good job, and it's a significant amount of compost that we're talking about. I just know parks would probably help us if we said,
Sure.
Could we sponsor or suggest a compost Saturday morning over at the urban, and there might be other urban gardens in Englewood that do the same thing. So that's just an idea that I think for a lot of folks, get your hands dirty and talk to an expert and say,
Yeah.
Why do you do it this way instead of that way? How long does it take and all that?
I think it's brilliant. Now, as far as content, and do we have enough runway to
No.
promote, I
Not
think
for
the answer
this
is
one.
no before the magazine drops, but
For the next
an alternative
one,
would be,
yes.
could we say, be on the lookout, if we're gonna spotlight composting, be on the lookout for future public education events at.
I would wary against putting that in a magazine unless you have something set in stone that you're gonna have that.
Sure.
And I know our communications team would say that too, like unless it's in the books, they're not gonna put like, be on the lookout
Just
for an event. But that's enough leeway so this drops in February and the next one is like perfect timing for a compost one. So I guess like put that in your back hat. If there's some kind of collaboration there, I'm happy to help with too.
And I'm not calling myself an expert, but I've got my
I would
hands.
say you're an expert.
But worst
Are you
case,
gonna
I
say
can talk
biochar?
about compost, but there's more experts than me, but, I could work with Deb or Parks or somebody and say, it could be very informal, it doesn't, but if it'd really be an eye opener for people to see the screens and see the compost come down and take some home and see the process of how it unfolds. And I can run down the gentleman who's the expert over there. And when he does it, he's educating all the time. He's explaining to people why we do it this way. So I'll have time on my hands. So I would volunteer to help make that thing happen if
Yeah.
anyone's
Cool.
interested in doing it.
I love the idea, Mike.
Yeah, I do
And,
too. Follow through with it maybe.
yeah, okay,
For a compost piece for the magazine, the one thing I will say is we're gonna highlight the sustainability grant awardees to get them primed for the second cycle that opens in April. So February to April is a pretty short time, so it's perfect. And we have a decent bit of compost projects that were awarded.
Nice.
Tracy's is one of them. We also have someone doing like a neighborhood compost drop in their area. So composting definitely will be part of
Great.
this magazine.
Okay.
okay, so that's priority number one. Tracy, thoughts?
Yeah, so I just wanted to, I love the idea of a hands-on workshop, Michael. Like I think people really kind of understand it better if they can kind of see it. But one thing that I wanted to add with the sustainability grant, I met with Compost Colorado last week when we started building the little libraries. And that's one thing that we talked about is when we put the library at the Inglewood Rec Center, which is going to be in January, that we want to do some kind of workshop on composting. So it kind of aligns with what you were just talking about. So just to throw that out there.
We could do one or both. I mean, more is better as far as I'm concerned.
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay. Tracy, are your composting little libraries being discussed anywhere or highlighted?
Not at the moment, but that's going to be part of the sustainability grant.
Oh, that's what that'll be.
Highlights.
Got it.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Just making sure that had appropriate.
And I know Coco is going to be putting it in their newsletter as well.
And then also when they're done, because it's a project funded through the city, like our social media team can highlight it. And like, that's a really good, that's the stuff they love to highlight is the community projects.
Okay, so moving on here. I've got putting compost to good use. And I have sort of starting a garden, soil health, all of sort of that all in one topic. And I'll send that to the comms team as priority number one.
I like having the tree ordinance in there to let people know what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's too soon or not, but.
Evan, you can chime in. In my opinion, I would probably wait until it's hopefully passed. I think that's more impactful. But Evan, I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I mean, until it's still like, hasn't been fully formed yet. So it's probably best to keep it out of the limelight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think the comms team can do plenty with the aforementioned priority number one. I had in here, I don't know if we've mentioned it before in print magazine, Mel, I think you've highlighted the home energy rebates in your newsletter. I don't know, it's cold. You know, I had ours done last year and from Excel. It was free, scheduled it 2 days out, and they came and made like 4 or 5 fixes to my house, and it's been, I've seen the benefits of it. So I didn't know if that was worth mentioning. If there's any ongoing work with Excel, if it's timely, we could include something like that. And then Mel here, any partnerships that came to mind that the cities, besides the grant work?
We're gonna have a lot of really juicy stuff for 2025, but everything is like in the works currently where it's a little premature.
Looking at the past edition, it seems like the comms team can use probably a whole page for the grant stuff, but say half a page, and then they can use the bottom half, just like they did in the winter, to talk about gardening, composting, things like that. So there's plenty of content and space to be shared there. Any other thoughts before we wrap this section of the agenda?
I do like the anti-idling just because it's timely. Well, might be past timely, but I think, I mean, again, just talking about repetition, the more people hear that, it might be a small little blurb that we could put in.
Okay. Tracy, any volunteer opportunities remaining at BARD?
Yes. So phase 1 is, it's wrapping up, but we still have mulch to spread, because I got an abundance of it. So I'm trying to do that on the weekends. But
do you want to do a blast?
It's not
another day.
What?
Do you want to do another volunteer blast, another volunteer day?
That would be great. You know, obviously weather is kind of the issue, but we've had some lovely weather, so it's been, you know, we've been able to do more through, you know, this time of year. So I'm just wondering, it's probably not a good thing to put into the magazine just because it's, you know, it could be one weekend and not another weekend. So I don't want to say like, hey, it's every Sunday from 12 to 2, because that's what we were trying to do. So
all right,
maybe wait until spring for that, because there'll be another big push for Bear Park when we do the planting.
Yeah, the magazine is really for stuff that's like very much set in stone, like big events, things like that.
Yeah.
Because it is very much our comms team that gets the brunt end of it if things change. And yeah, we just want to keep it very set in stone events.
Yeah, so maybe just waiting on that for the spring issue when I know when the planting date is going to happen.
Okay. I have taken notes. I've got enough to send to Mel, encapsulating our conversation and our priorities, and we'll see what the comms team comes up with. Thanks, Mike, for letting me have an expanded
and I think I could speak for you and Tracy are doing a great job. So, I mean, when in doubt, make a decision.
Yes.
I mean, there's nothing on there I have any problem with. There's a lot of good stuff.
Sure.
You just can't talk about 25 things
right
in a newsletter. But you get to a point, I think you and Tracy should just make the decision and go forward.
Cool.
We trust you.
Thanks for the vote.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Okay. All right. So, we have a commission vote.
We do.
Why don't you lead the charge on that?
You got it.
All
right. So, Lana, this is a vote to have Lana go from alternate member to full member starting in March. We need a vote from the commission that they approve of the move. Essentially, we're going to have open seats, and it's better to have an alternate go to full than,
Concur.
Any questions before voting?
I appreciate Lana coming to these meetings and asking questions and getting up to speed, so that's impressive. Thank you.
Where are the open seats coming from? Are we getting more people?
Mike is
or-
termed out. He has been on a commission on this
Putting me out to
commission
pasture.
since 2018, right?
Yes.
It's been a long time, so he is not allowed to run again, which we all are not happy about. So he is termed out, and then we had an open seat from when Tiana had stepped down kind of mid-year.
That's right.
Yeah.
So when do I officially step out?
Your last meeting is February,
Okay,
so then that's why she would start full member March.
okay. And
Yeah.
then Patrick will take over for me?
We have a whole new vote in March for
You better get your
chair,
campaign
for
going.
chair and vice
Done.
chair,
All right.
yeah.
Front yard signs all over.
Well, good. So,
So you have to vote. Yeah.
so do I hear a motion or a vote that we move Lana into a full-time position on the commission?
Yeah, thanks for your contributions and showing up to every meeting and your thoughtful preparation. I would make the motion to move Lana from alternate member to full member starting in March.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
A second.
Patrick, second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. I don't hear any nays, so welcome aboard, Lana.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's great. Okay, now, tree protection ordinance discussion. We're gonna turn it over to Evan.
Yes.
Take it away, Evan.
And Evan did get all of the questions that you all had.
Yeah, that's right.
Last time too.
Walk us through that.
So I don't, yeah, Evan, I'll let you start.
Yeah, so do you want to go through the questions?
Yeah. I can pull those up.
And then there's nothing really new coming from me, but any additional questions or
Can you
looking
just
at
tell us
next
a little bit
steps?
about yourself, like your position?
Oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot that you hadn't met Evan yet.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know.
Introduce yourself and your position.
So I'm the assistant city forester. I work in the parks department.
Okay.
And Tim Holt is our parks supervisor. So
Okay.
that's my supervisor.
And how long have you been doing this?
As a forester, an arborist? or
Yeah, in
Inglewood?
general and for Inglewood.
I've been here almost 3 years, so like
Okay.
2 years and 9 months. And I've been doing this since about 20 years, I guess.
Oh, okay, so cool.
Since time began.
Since time began. Deep woods of East Texas. Um,
Old Beaumont.
Yeah, so that's sort of, yeah, so I'm sort of the arborist, forester, horticulture for the Parks Department.
Glad we have you.
Designated tree guy.
I go by that many times a day.
So Evan, I can read off the questions that they had
Okay.
from last time, and it can be kind of like that. So the first question was around monitoring. So who is doing the monitoring? Does this person have the capacity to do the monitoring?
So there isn't, that's something that would be, that's like I said, this ordinance hasn't been fully like formed. So the document that y'all have worked on and Parks and Rec Commission worked on and is working on, I guess still, is sort of like a draft of what a tree protection ordinance looks like. And then taking those big bullet points and filling them out how, not how I see fit, but how this commission and Parks and Rec Commission sees fit. And then those comments come to me, I put them into like industry standard language and turn them back in. So that's something that's missing from it. There's a lot of things missing. So we don't, it could be code enforcement, it could be me, it could be somebody else. But we don't currently have a position to do that. So we don't currently have that capacity. But if this is something that council approves and wants to do, then that capacity is gonna be created somewhere, somehow. Whether from existing employees or a combination of.
what would your recommendation be, or what would your possible answers be to that question of how is it monitored and policed, or how's a developer held accountable? Will there be a process, paperwork, follow-up visit?
Yeah.
All those mechanics, I guess, are what.
So that's where, like, I would say it's like, I might have said code enforcement before. What I mean is, actually mean it's like building code, like permitting,
Okay.
not code enforcement.
Okay.
So it would be in the permitting process with the city building code
Okay.
and the permitting. So if this is something they want to do, and I think it's in the document, like it's part of that process, just like they would have to do for stormwater or easements
So
or something
it's
like
rigid and formalized.
that. Yeah, I mean, it would have to, it only works if it's inside the permitting process.
Okay.
It's not something that's like, sometimes is enforced, sometimes not. It has to be
Right.
inside, like our actual like code
So
language.
If I was walking down the street and I saw a triplex being built, and I saw a bunch of trees getting uprooted or cut down, what have you, I'm thinking, well, I hope the city's on top of that, or I hope that that tree ordinance is taking place. I don't know if it is, but I hope it is. Or do I call the city and say, do you know trees are being cut down on this address? You know,
That's cities that have these, that's what happens.
because I'm on the code enforcement advisory committee, and there are many instances where we'll have a code on, let's just say, weeds in the alley, or, you know, not parking your car on your front lawn. Code enforcement doesn't have the wherewithal to monitor every street in Englewood, so they rely on citizens sometimes to call in and say, hey, something's going on.
Yeah.
That's not the optimal way to do it, but with the tree ordinance, the same kind of question comes up.
Like I said, like I misspoke that it's not code enforcement. It would be in the permitting process.
Okay.
So it'd be the same if nosy neighbor number one looked over
Okay.
and said, this building's too close to my fence.
Okay,
I'm gonna pull that permit.
okay,
It would be in that permitting process. That's how most cities do.
okay.
So, like I said, we don't currently have that capacity, and I'm not sure about what is that department called?
Community development?
Is it community development?
Yeah.
That does planning and permitting. So it would have to be worked into their work process.
At the front end, and if you're gonna build a triplex here,
This all has to be done before.
oh, this, yes, I think that's what we wanna hear.
I believe that language is in
Okay,
that sort of draft we have created.
Okay.
So that's the answer to that first question.
okay, that's a good answer.
That no, we don't, but if this is something that is passed, then that it will be just like all new projects. It'll be created somehow.
I just have a procedural question before we go on. So like this draft goes before council as just like more of like a policy, and then if they pass it, then like the kind of like legally binding words happen, and like a formal document takes place where all this stuff is worked out. Like how does this procedurally work with council?
That's a great question.
For an ordinance, our city attorney's office will draft up a legally binding ordinance.
So if it's passed, then it goes to them to shape it?
So the city attorney will create so we're saying we're bringing this ordinance, they'll draft up an ordinance with this document already. The city council can vote on that ordinance if they want to pass it or not. But they can also say, well, we want these things changed. City council really can do whatever they would like with it. But the ordinance really will just list out like what this document has said.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is really just like an outline of what an ordinance looks like, and it has some specific details from comments from this group and Parks and Rec Commission. But Parks and Rec Commission is the city's tree board. So if anything is altered, it has to go back to them.
Okay.
I believe, because it needs to go through the tree board,
Okay.
because that's our official tree board for Tree City USA.
Has this edition already passed Parks?
It did, but now it's changed since then.
So it's gotta go back anyway?
It's gotta go back anyways. So
Okay.
you might as well get everything you
Yeah.
want.
Yeah.
Added, subtracted, altered, and they can go back through and say, no, we want that back in. And this process can continue until we finally take the next step.
When does Parks meet? Does anyone know?
Tim would know. Monthly.
Yeah, we meet monthly.
As far as retroactive reporting or in real time, is this something, say I'm Michael's situation or scenario, I'm walking down the street, I see foul play. We have the Inglefix app that's, the infrastructure sort of built to submit complaints. Is this something we could add to that app? Like, development going up, tree ordinance violation. I just wonder if that's an idea that citizens can, or a tool that citizens could use. Perhaps it is being by the book, but just in the case it's not, just flagging it.
That's how a lot of cities work. Somebody goes by, oh, they're removing that tree. Well, I'm gonna go see if they have the proper paperwork
Yeah.
to remove that tree. Or same thing, building a fence or building an ADU in your backyard. It would be under like kind of the same questioning process.
I don't know if that merits any change within the ordinance, but thinking.
Yeah, that would all be
Unfortunately.
something I think would be hashed out in a much more specific document than what we've got.
Cool. That was
You
my
know,
question.
something, Logan, down the road, after the ordinance is approved by council and it's a living document, Sustainability Commission, in its communications, could talk about that ordinance and say what Evan just said.
Yeah.
Which is, as a citizen, if you ever have any questions, you are invited to call up Engelfix and get an answer. And that's a positive message
Agreed.
relating to sustainability, because Englewood's a big town. There's a lot of neighborhoods and a lot of things going on that things could slip through the cracks, maybe.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, 100%.
citizens, I think, have every right
Yeah.
to know about that.
I'll note that.
They would know
Someone
sort
has
of
an idea.
in the language in the draft, whether that tree has been permitted for removal
Right.
and has been mitigated by whatever circumstance
Sure.
they're gonna mitigate with. So they would,
Yeah.
that would all be planned out before something
No,
happens.
I think that'd be
And if there
great.
isn't an answer, then they would be
Yeah.
Cool.
subject to.
Okay.
All
What's
right, next question is for 5.2.2, which is around the Englewood Tree Fund. The question is existing trees where? Because it says funds will be used to plant new and preserve existing trees in Englewood.
So this has been through a few alterations. Initially, it was that funding would go back to that neighborhood where the tree was removed. And I believe it was possibly altered by the Parks and Rec Commission that it would just go to like a general fund that can be used for anywhere in Englewood. So it would be up to, once again, something that hasn't been hashed out yet, the managers of the Englewood Tree Fund, what that's going to be used for, whether it's going to be for finding houses that need trees and getting trees in neighborhoods that have low canopy count, or doing large planting projects in the city on public property. That would be up to the individuals that manage the Englewood Tree Fund, which hasn't been hashed out at all.
I guess my only concern with that one is like the equity piece of it. So if there's a tree that's removed in an area that already has so little, but then the fund goes to put a tree in a high income, high canopy area, I feel like, I don't know how that would be.
I think that can be easily fixed by putting the right people as managers of the Englewood Tree Fund.
Right.
Because the reality is that our lowest canopy counts are not places where you can plant trees. That's why there's no trees. Industrial areas along Santa Fe. So if there happens to be one house and they have one tree and they remove it, or they build an apartment complex, well, we can't plant a tree in the scrapyard next door. You know, so some areas that have a low canopy count, finding a spot to put a tree is going to be very difficult. So I think flexibility is really good, but also having the right managers of the tree fund can solve that. They can somewhat do it at their own discretion.
Could it be stated or explained? Good Lord, Logan, I think it was a year ago, you were talking about Google Maps and photography, that you could look at Englewood and you could see where the canopy is the greatest and where it's the least. I mean, could it be as simple as, when in doubt, the city will make every effort to put a tree where it's needed most?
And that can be
and then
put
leave it
into
to you
some
all.
sort of documentation if the Englewood Tree Fund gets created. That can all be hashed out down the line. Yeah, so, you know, we've done a canopy assessment. We know those areas.
So, you know.
Is the Englewood Tree Fund tied to this document, or is that like part of the Parks and Rec?
It is something that is proposed to be created as far as mitigation. So if somebody's removing a tree, they can mitigate through planting new trees, or they can mitigate by paying money to the Englewood Tree Fund, which would in turn protect and plant trees in Englewood. So it doesn't exist. It's proposed in this document.
Any other questions on that before we go to the next one?
Tim has his hand raised.
Go ahead.
Oh, yep.
As a point of clarification, this current ordinance as it sits today has been approved by the Parks and Rec Commission. So if no changes are made tonight, then we would proceed in getting it put onto the docket for council, probably late December, February timeline.
Thanks.
Perfect. So the next question is, where did the $300 fee come from?
That was generated by looking at examples from other cities in Colorado that have something like this. There's not that many cities that do. Fort Collins, Littleton. And originally we were looking at different methods to value, you know, that dollar amount. And this is the one that sort of came back. But it can be changed. So that's just like a number that I came up with from looking at other cities. But it's really about, that's why I put in my answer, if you had a 10-inch DBH, which is diameter at 4.5 feet of 10 inches, the fee would be $3,000. So with $3,000, you're looking at planting maybe 5 3-inch trees. You know? So you have to get enough money to actually put more trees in the ground. So getting, you know, $500 doesn't really go that far anymore. So that's where that number came from. It's trying to find a value that can replace these trees with new trees. So like I said, it's not too punitive, but it provides usable funding.
Any other questions on that one? I see none.
I'm remiss, but there was I don't believe that there was any thought that any of that money would ever be spent for tree trimming or maintenance. So if the city helps me put a tree on my property, I'm responsible for that tree. Correct? Okay, correct. I just wanted the clarification.
Yeah, and there was a lot of questions about putting trees on private property and things like that. And it was ultimately decided that, you know, it might be more useful to have, instead of always doing it on public property, putting them on private property since they're coming from private property.
Sure. Okay.
All right, the next one is, I think maybe more of a statement, but said it would be good for there to be a recommended list of replacement trees that require moderate to low water and some that are critical host plants.
Yeah, so we currently use the Front Range recommended tree list for Colorado, which was just updated this year. And we've talked about creating one just for Englewood. is something that we can do down the line, but the trees on the Front Range list we'd just be recreating that list.
The next one is asking how multifamily unit is defined, because there's no definition in there. And the topic, this came up because the topic of ADUs came up for single family home, like would that count as a multifamily? So just more discussion there, I guess.
Yeah, so going through code and talking to staff and community development, it would only apply, and these are the words, I believe, in city code, to the development or redevelopment of commercial, multi-unit, attached, and apartment mixed-use housing as defined in city code. And it would not apply to detached housing or ADUs for detached houses.
Got it.
So the city defines, like, obviously commercial, then there's multi-unit, attached. I can't remember which one. One of them is sort of like the townhouse, where each one is its own sort of address or own sort of property. And then one of them is like a triplex or quadplex or duplex, where it's all one property, multiple addresses in one property. And then apartments, mixed uses, like apartment complexes. So that's what this would be used for. So if somebody was building an ADU in their detached house, this would not apply. They could still remove any tree they want to.
We got that.
Perfect. And then the last thing Tracy.
So just really quick on the ADU piece, with ADUs, they still get a separate address. So wouldn't that still apply to people that are putting ADUs on their property?
From what I read, not if it's a detached house.
Okay.
Okay, the next one is, again, a statement more than a question. It says, I think this is great, other than the requirement that a replacement tree have the same DBH as the removed one. Large trees have less resilience than trees planted when they are small.
Yeah, so I think that language is already clarified in it. So it's not that, if you had to replace a 20-inch tree with a 20-inch tree, it would cost like over $1 million. So that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at the combined diameter. So it could be 10 1-inch trees for, 2.5-inch trees. That's what we're looking at. It could be a 5-inch tree and a 2.5-inch trees or whatever. So it's that combined DBH, right? That language is already in there.
I had a question about that. Say you remove one tree and then put 5 new ones, like in terms of like ecological benefits and like ecosystem services, are those new smaller trees really equivalent to that bigger one?
No.
Is this just like, I guess you're just getting this from like standard industry practice?
Yeah, it's basically impossible to replace,
Right.
like ecosystem law, like loss of that tree. So this is an industry standard way to do it. And that's sort of where the money comes in as well.
Yeah.
So that hopefully you're planting trees that can turn into what you lost. And, in a lot of cases, if there's a large tree and then there's, like most new developments, there's not a lot of yard.
Mm-hmm.
There's not room to put 5 trees anyways.
Right.
So they're gonna have to choose
Okay.
whether they plant one tree and donate, I think, or put money in the tree fund, like all that can be hashed out later.
To your knowledge, do a lot of these developers just choose to pay towards the tree fund?
Like in other cities that I've worked?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would say most developers, they find a way to work within the system to benefit the development.
Right.
So sometimes you can work around a tree and it's more cost effective to work around it. Sometimes you can't. So it's more cost effective to just, because trees are expensive and then having a contractor come in and plant them is even more expensive. Sometimes it's easier just to pay.
Yeah, that's what I would guess.
But currently, they're just taking them out and don't have any repercussions, so,
Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
They're
And then-
slowing down.
Yeah, they're.
And then some of the language in there is that not all trees, if this does pass, there's gonna be large trees that are gonna be allowed to be removed. So if there's very large trees that are in bad condition or unsafe or invasive species, things like that, they're just gonna be gone and there's no repercussion, there's no mitigation. Because not all trees are assets, some are liabilities. So it's not just like black and white. If it's a tree, you have to plant new trees. Like if it's a huge bad shape, like Siberian elm, it can just be wiped off because those are actually liabilities to the community.
Are there other questions people have, especially because we have Evan here? Any like qualms or any other questions around the tree protection ordinance?
I have just an educational question. In terms of pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere, if you had one big old tree and you cut it down and you put in 5 smaller trees, what's the net difference in terms of how much CO2 is being pulled? Does one big tree pull more CO2 out than 5 small trees? Over the course of, say, 10 years?
Doesn't that depend on the species?
It's gonna depend on the species and it's gonna depend on a lot of things. Like, so the biggest thing is that most trees a larger tree is gonna absorb more carbon.
Okay.
Because it just has more capacity for growth.
Okay.
So a large tree growing this much is more
Okay.
material than a little tree growing 6 feet.
Okay.
Just because it's just the little bits add up. But the big thing is the storage of carbon. So depending on what happens to that tree. So like a tree that's like logged and turned into 2x4s and ends up in a house, it's still stored
Right.
in the house.
Right.
But a tree that's removed and put in a dumpster and put in a dump where it decomposes slowly, and the carbon's going to be released.
Or made into biochar.
Or made into biochar.
Yeah.
So
It's not an easy answer.
it's almost, it's not something that is ever going to be like.
And the
I'm
mature
sure
tree.
there's a lot of scientific studies that show, but it does depend on species, how fast it's growing. It's a lot of variation.
Okay.
But in general, a larger tree is always going to have more ecosystem benefit than smaller trees.
I see Dana's hand is raised too online.
Yeah.
I think there was one more question as well.
Go ahead, Dana.
Okay, thanks. My question is about the criteria for deciding what trees are okay to remove and which aren't. And I understand the Colorado recommended tree list is probably the basis of a lot of that. But as far as I know, that list doesn't include ecological value. And it would be nice if that was added to the criteria. And like the Colorado Wildlife Federation lists, if you put in a zip code, you can find out like how many species of butterflies the tree supports. So my question is about the criteria, which isn't part of the ordinance right now.
So the criteria for deciding whether or not a tree can be removed?
Yeah.
Yeah, so in this ordinance, any tree can be removed. It's just whether or not it has to be mitigated. So any tree can be removed. You can remove the biggest, nicest, most beautiful tree in the city if you did the proper mitigation for it. There are trees that, I think it's in the draft, choosing trees that should and shouldn't be preserved at all. And so that's usually based on safety, health, and species. So the species we're looking at are mostly invasive species.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and those won't be trees that you find on the Front Range recommended tree list.
Right. It would be nice if there was some way that there was more protection for the really important species, you know, the low water using plants and native trees. I know there aren't a lot of native trees, but if someone has, for example, a mature gamble oak on the property, like that's a bigger deal to cut down. So, but it sounds like all trees will be treated equally.
Yeah, and this is something that if there's any edits that the group would like to make, they can make those edits and it will go back to the tree board. All the comments and work we've done is set up just how it's written out. So any tree can be removed. Because if they're doing a large development, sometimes every tree on the site is going to be removed regardless. So if they're trying, from the feedback I got, trying to make it kind of friendly for both sides has been sort of like I don't know what the right word would be, but it's not too restrictive. I think that was something that even council had said, is not having it too restrictive for development. So that's how this draft was formed. But if that's something that needs to be altered or wants to be altered, it can be.
I will say I wish Mayor Sierra was here because it is something that we do have to keep council in mind. Council is typically one that isn't for a stick, it's for a carrot.
Yeah.
And they did vocalize that when Mike, Evan and I went, that they want it to be as least restrictive, as possible.
Dana brings up an interesting point. I mean, if we were going native, we'd be looking at juniper and cedar. Because 200 years ago, that's what was here. There weren't maples, there weren't pine trees, right? So is there any thought, and maybe there's other trees beside, but I've got a juniper tree in my backyard. My God, it's 40 feet tall and it's indestructible. I love it. Would it make sense to lean in the direction of those kinds of trees?
No, so you have to think of the the whole Front Range urban forest as a man-made ecosystem. Sure. It wouldn't exist without us, and it wouldn't exist without irrigation. So using a native palette, while it sounds great, it's probably the least diverse way to plant an urban forest in this area. Just because, like you said, our default ecosystem is not a forest. All the trees most of the trees that you see only exist because of us.
Right.
I get that. So the native palette for trees is very limited and probably doesn't achieve the goals we would like our urban forest to.
Okay, so you would never plant a juniper tree?
No, I would. It's part of our palette of species, but if we restricted it to only like these 10 species.
Oh, I'm just saying where possible, or is it possible, and is it a consideration that when you look at a park or an area, and I'll call them natives, are those in the palette or the list of the possibilities?
100%.
Okay, that's all.
Anybody planting a tree should have a goal in mind for that tree, whether it's aesthetics or shade or native habitat or whatever it is. And then you select the species based on that goal.
Well,
we do the same thing.
Okay, it would be nice. I know that it is a limited palette of native trees, but it would be nice if water conservation and supporting bird habitat and caterpillars and butterflies if that was part of the criteria. And that's all I have to say.
It sounds like my understanding is the choice of planting a tree is complex. Like there's no one answer, right? Like you want the ecosystem services, you want shade, right? And maybe that's not, it doesn't line up with being the most water friendly, things like that. I think it's like a complex calculus that seems to me it would be difficult to mandate what specific kind of trees should go in.
Yeah, it is, but it's not impossible. And that's where, like I said, the Front Range recommended tree list isn't just like a random list.
Right.
It's created by foresters from across the Front Range and, you know, professors and researchers that spend their whole life finding these varieties and trees that we do plant in all across the Front Range. So that list, and if you look at the list, it actually has like which ones are best, like water, you know, water-wise, which ones are salt tolerant, which ones are more cold hardy. Those factors are all in there. So when people are picking trees, they can see those sort of benefits and from each variety. So
Just thinking it might be leaning more towards stick than carrot, and this might not even be part of this draft document, but if there is that scale of these species are better than these, you could have that $300 penalty be a sliding scale of like, if this species of tree is more important for our habitat, this could be $400 per inch as opposed to $300. But I think that's a topic for a later date.
yeah, I mean, if that's something that y'all would like to add in there, we can definitely do that.
Evan,
But it
tell
would
me
be something that this group would need to add, and it would go to the tree board.
Tell me if I'm mistaken, but I was taking the tree protection ordinance as this is like the high level document of the work that will be done and not the details of all that stuff. So
Exactly.
I think they're great comments for like, if this passes, all of that detail, then it's triggered into motion.
Okay, agreed.
100%.
Yeah, I don't think it's worth it.
Yes, yeah,
Oh,
considered.
I just had one other question then. So is this tree ordinance tailored towards these are planned tree removals as opposed to, oops, we backed up the bulldozer into the tree and we ended up killing one? Would that be wrapped up into it? Is it like X has to equal X, or is it just?
So how it's written out is basically this would be the process from, as I remember. Somebody plans a development, they start applying for permits, and they start going through the process. And surveying and inspecting and assessing the trees is part of that process.
Okay.
So once a tree has been chosen for protection, we say, all right, this is a species that we want to keep. The developer says, yes, we're going to keep that. They're going to go through the tree protection protocols that are written in the plan.
Okay.
If those protocols are broken and then something happens to the tree, they spill diesel fuel underneath it, they hit it with the backhoe, it gets damaged, it now needs to be removed. That language is in there that it goes into the mitigation.
Got it. Perfect.
Sort of as a penalty.
Understood.
Yeah. And all those, like I said, all those details would be hashed out at a later date so that they're codified.
Any
We
other-
good?
Does the commission feel like after getting all those answers to their questions, are there any edits that you all see that you want to make to the tree ordinance? And I'm just really pushing that because we have Evan, we have his time right now. So if you have those questions, the time is now because I won't have the answers.
And Mel, I had one more answer in mind. Okay. There was something about replacement tree locations. Do you have that question?
Oh yeah, I thought we answered that earlier
Okay,
with
okay.
where the tree would be going.
Yeah, there's a question about where the tree would go in. The replacement trees, if they're planting trees, go on the property where the tree was removed.
Okay.
They can't go plant a tree in the park.
So if it doesn't go into the fund, then it goes on the property.
Yeah, so if somebody removes this tree and they're gonna plant new trees, those trees have to go on that property where that tree was removed. They can't go to your other development in town or something like that. That was the last response I had.
I have one general information question. I think the first time you spoke, you opened my eyes up to the fact that a tree's roots go this way, not that way, and that they need a certain amount of girth or spread. And I walk around Englewood, and even in city property and city streets, I see trees that have a little tiny block of dirt or gravel or wood chips. And I'm thinking, are those trees inevitably going to die? And if they inevitably die, would we replace and make more permeable ground around that tree? I mean, what's your thought, or where would we go in the future with all these nice little trees in little boxes or little squares? They're all going to be dead. And what will happen then? What would the city do? And some of them are probably on private property, and some of them I think are on city property.
Yeah, so you remove.
Whack them down.
It's dead, you remove it, you remove the stump, you.
Put a flower pot in there.
Well, yeah, no, the ground, you can plant a tree right there. We do it all the time.
But it's not going to grow very big, will it? I mean.
Like I said, the root systems aren't that deep.
Okay.
So if you grind the stump out or pull the stump out, it's totally fine.
But what I'm getting at is if this is a square and this is cement, tree grows up, it dies, you cut it down. You just put another tree in that square and then say, well, we'll get 10 years out of it, or?
If you remove the root properly, yeah.
You'll
It's a
have,
process, you can't just plant it in like the wood.
okay. Just as, I went to a meeting in Boulder and I thought this was interesting. They were talking about water and policy in Boulder County. And they said, one of the things that can have the most impact quickly on water usage and cooling down the environment is increasing the amount of permeable ground. So back to parking lots and asphalt and little boxes where trees grow, the more you can expand that, the more asphalt you can chip out, the more cement you can chip out, the better for the environment for a whole bunch of reasons. I just hope that's in your lexicon of thinking that wherever possible, we're going to chip out asphalt or cement. When we replace that tree, maybe we can make the box a little bit bigger. Is that in your thinking? Is that something?
Yeah,
you guys
I think it's always a consideration for anybody working landscape architecture, arboriculture, but it's a constant battle between infrastructures. So like if you look at trees as green infrastructure, like I said, they serve a purpose. They cool, they provide shade, they provide habitat, all these things. But when you're fighting with infrastructure that's more expensive and more important, trees lose.
Yeah.
When you're fighting with stormwater, gas lines, water lines, sewer lines, electrical lines. Yes, sometimes those spaces where trees went in, they shouldn't have gone in there in the first place.
Right.
And if it's that case, then those trees are never replaced.
Well, I hate parking lots, so that's my thing. Asphalt parking lots are all over. I just want to get rid of them. Put wood chips in. Just get rid of those out of them. But that's my problem. But that's a good, thank you for explaining
Yeah,
that.
but like when we have trees, we remove the stumps. And if we remove it properly, new trees can be planted.
You can get some years growth in there.
Yeah,
Okay.
like I said, it's not that deep.
Really? That's interesting.
Like you see like a spruce tree fall over.
Yeah.
There's not a big carrot that comes out of the ground. It's just like
That
a
made an
flat,
impression on me when
it's
you
like a
explained
flat
that,
little
yeah.
plate that pops up. So it's really not that much you have to remove.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Have
Do
we
you see
covered that?
Dana's hand?
Are we, I'm sorry, Dana, are we, I don't want to listen to Dana, but are we needing to vote on anything tonight?
So it's up to you all. If you feel comfortable with all the answers you have been given, you all can vote if the commission approves of the tree protection ordinance as it is.
Okay.
Or if you want to take more time with it, we can do it in January. It's completely up to you all, unless Parks correct me if there is a timeline that they're working on.
And then, I'm sorry, Dana, I cut you off, so let's let Dana speak, because maybe that'll give us an idea.
If Parks and Rec Commission has approved it, then it's just waiting.
It's just waiting. Okay.
I had one more question, which is, is the requirement going to be to replace the tree, the removed tree with the same species, or will there be a recommendation of what to replace it with?
It's not stipulated in there, but it would be, I mean, obviously they would plan for, if they're doing replacement trees, what those trees would be, and that plan would have to be approved. So it would only, you wouldn't approve species that don't work in that new location. So, there's scenarios where you could plant the same species again. There's scenarios where that species won't fit the goals for that site anymore, and different species would be needed. But that hasn't been hashed out.
Cool, thank you.
I think it's a good idea to vote on this. I don't know how everybody else is feeling, but especially because this is not the final document, it seems like it makes sense to get this moving, not hold it up.
Yeah, I want to move this off of our plate.
Great, that seems like a general consensus.
Yeah. I have to remind us, again, we sometimes slip into the granular, which is not where we belong. Speaking for myself, I like what has been put before us. I like at the 20,000 foot level, this seems to make sense. And I think our role is to stay at the 20,000. I also heard tonight that I don't think there's anything preventing us at some point in the future, this group saying, we do have a couple granular thoughts that we'd like to, now that it's been approved, now that it's there, I don't think there's anything preventing us from getting specific 6 months from now and saying, we feel this is important, or we feel the city ought to factor this in. So I like the ball to keep moving, I guess is my bias.
Agreed.
So is this group comfortable moving to vote to approve or endorse what has been put before us? If so, I would entertain a motion in that direction.
Second.
I don't know what to say.
That's fine. Or do we vote?
I would move to approve the current draft on 12/10/24 of the current tree ordinance and move it forward if there's no opposition online from Shelley or Tracy.
So we have moved by Michael, seconded by Patrick.
Oh, I thought that's right.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Then it's approved. Thank you,
Work,
very good.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Tim.
Evan.
Good appreciate your work.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Tim.
All right, moving down. Mel, Sustainability Division.
Thanks,
All
Tim.
right, thanks Evan, appreciate it.
Carry on.
Yeah, and like always, any questions or comments?
All right.
You got my phone number and email.
Right on. See you later.
Thanks.
Thanks all. I mean Evan, not all, I'm already at the end of the night.
Okay.
Okay, quick reminder, so the Sustainability Division. Visioning is the birth child of Michael's question of saying, I don't know how to explain what the Sustainability Division does to my neighbors. And I was like, that's so valid. So Tim Dodd, myself, our Green Business Coordinator, and our City Management Fellow, we all met. We did a 4-hour visioning of what we do, what we want to do, and the benefit that we provide. So here is just a little presentation for you all of the outcome of that. So we have the vision for our division is that Englewood is a resilient, responsible, and resourceful city where built and social systems adapt to current and future needs and challenges, creating a thriving community. So we have those 3 words: resilient, responsible, resourceful. And then I'll go through the 3 sides and then we can go back for any conversation too, just so you get like a complete picture. And then I think what's most helpful with kind of what Mike said is like, what are those bullet points that we can say that the Sustainability Division does. So we were going through all the projects that we do. So we said we help accomplish the goals and projects found within the sustainability plan. That's like the high level. We removed barriers and obstacles for residents, visitors, businesses, nonprofits that want to participate in or advance sustainability initiatives. We implement practices and programs that either help reduce greenhouse gas emissions and or increase our community's resilience to climate change, because sometimes a project that will increase your resiliency, maybe it doesn't have a quantifiable greenhouse gas emission. That's okay. We're still going to do it because it's good for the community. Another one is implement or advances internal operations. So that's kind of like the internal composting we do for staff here. And then we also seek out and secure funding for sustainability. Hopefully you all saw that this year with us securing over $1 million for sustainability. That likely wouldn't have been done without having a sustainability division and the time to actually do it. We oversee and also assist in the development of plans, ensuring that it aligns with both the city and departmental goals. So the low-income energy efficiency strategy that you all helped with is part of it, our electric vehicle action plan, that's also part of it. Those are plans that, again, would not have been done likely without a sustainability division. We evaluate and study current and upcoming sustainability developments to decide if it's compatible and feasible with the Englewood community. So a good example is geothermal energy. Is that too big of a project for Englewood? Is it feasible, right? It's something that's very popular in sustainability, but is it good for us? Is it good for our community right now? Is something that we do. Another is ensuring that sustainability initiatives are equitable and address the needs of all community members, especially with that lens for underserved and vulnerable community members, again, pointing to that low-income energy efficiency strategy. We support local green businesses and innovations. A great example of that is Aiden's program that we launched for the Sustainable Business Partnership. And the last thing we have in there is that we collaborate with regional, state, and national sustainability networks to really make sure that we're doing the best that we can, learning from others and constantly improving. So that is the overall highlight. And I would love feedback or questions.
Very good. My thought is when I think about the commission and the department, the department does stuff I don't even know about. Well, that's pretty cool. I didn't know they were doing that, but I'm glad you're doing it. And I think what we do is serve as a sounding board, and sometimes you want us to be a sounding board, and sometimes you can proceed without us sounding off. But I'm struggling with explaining or understanding to my neighbors, so to speak, where does the commission fit in, and where does the division? And I'm supportive of everything you put up there. But it isn't crystal clear where those connections occur. And maybe it doesn't need to be, but it's just an observation of mine that we have a role in that, but it's not fully articulated or explainable at this point in time. Or am I wrong? Or am I just missing something?
I feel like the commission is definitely a bullet that was missing there. And I think it's because I find you all so inherent in everything that the sustainability division does. But I'll definitely add a bullet in there explicitly calling it out. But in my opinion, how I see the commission is a good example, again, is that low-income energy efficiency outreach strategy. Because back then I was a team of one. You all kind of help look at these things and say, okay, from an outsider perspective, like this is what I'm noticing, this is what I want changed, or our recommendations of what is changed. I can't remember, there was one thing Patrick pointed out, and he was like, this is how I'm reading it. And I was like, oh my God, that's totally not how I wanted that to come off. So it's like that stuff that's super helpful. Or I'm thinking of the sustainability budget of having true Englewood residents look at what the sustainability division budget will be and say, yeah, here's where I think the gaps are, here's where I think it can be better. And then the last example I'll give is the communication subcommittee of like, this is what residents, as a resident, will want to see in the magazine pertaining to sustainability. So I see you all honestly as like an extension of the sustainability division, but also a sounding board of like, we are truly the residents here and this is what we do or don't want.
Okay, That's good.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, if you could write that down.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
yeah, I can add it.
Amazing, because we should each be able to articulate what we're doing here.
Absolutely.
I feel like we're kind of like a clearinghouse as far as discussion and flow of information between the public, between the sustainability division, and even in front of city council. Because we have no teeth. There is nothing written in statute that says it has to go in front of our commission before it can move. You know, Parks does have that authority delegated. We don't. So we are an advisory board. And I think it's worth stating that clearly in this outline is we are, I like the idea, the verbiage of a sounding board. We're here for the community on behalf of the sustainability division.
An example of something that this group has done informally, and Dana has benefited or suffered from our efforts. If you just take pollinator gardens at Depot Park, I think from the get-go, this group has been a cheerleading group saying, go Dana, go Depot Park, go, go, go. We didn't have an official budget or game plan. And yet, Tim, who works for the city, listened to a lot of what we were saying, and a lot of what we were saying got incorporated into Depot Park. So that, to me, that's an example where there was influence coming from this group, but it wasn't black and white. It wasn't something you could put a finger on. And we also probably frustrated some people in that process because we were floundering trying to figure out what's our role. But we are a voice. We are a voice. And it's interesting that Parks Bond, native plants are in there. And there's money being budgeted that in our parks in Englewood, there will be sections of pollinator gardens. So I think that's a good thing. And I think we can take some ownership in that.
I thought something that was super cool with the Sustainability Commission was when that one business owner from Trush came to speak to you all. They had never reached out to city staff, and they were like, we want to talk to the Sustainability Commission to get their feedback. So I feel like residents and other people reaching out being like, you all clearly are passionate about this topic and have sway in the community where we want to talk to you.
Yep. Great. So we can pat ourselves on the back a little bit.
You should. You should.
I have a general question. I think the bullet points are really good. I guess I'm wondering why there isn't any mention of kind of like the human, non-human interface or ecological or some reference to the natural world within that vision statement. Like, I like this because it's kind of abstract, but I'm just wondering why it kind of is that abstract.
Can you dive in a little more, like why specifically like natural environment isn't in there?
Well, when I think about sustainability in general, I think about our interaction with the natural environment in terms of CO2 emissions, in terms of how we use natural resources. I think that sustainability is like tied to the natural world. Maybe that's just like an underlying assumption that's in there, whereas, like other divisions, of course, everything is tied up together, but like, housing or something like that, if you're looking at like that task force or code enforcement, you're not tying it to kind of our relationship with the ecological world. So I'm just wondering why that's not in there, or if like you're thinking of this differently, because I'm just thinking like if you told like an elementary school kid, like, what is sustainability? You would probably like, I don't know if they would understand what sustainability is from this statement or how
So
it's
we
connected
have
to the natural world. I don't know if that makes
City
sense.
Council made the definition for how they define
Okay.
sustainability. So this is supposed to be the vision on top of it. And I should have put that in there, but I'm pretty sure they have it as like a city that uses its resources wisely or something like that.
Okay.
It's pretty broad.
Okay.
I will say, and I don't think this is wrong, for Englewood City Council, it's pretty neutral temperature on sustainability. So for Sheridan, they're very, because they're a justice for a community, a lot of environmental injustice is there. They want it to be very like forward with sustainability, where sometimes it's just kind of that balancing game of what your city council might
Okay.
be open to
That makes
and
sense.
celebrate, I guess.
Yeah, I guess even that, yeah, like resource use kind of alludes to what I'm talking about. That makes more sense. Yeah, I was just wondering why the language was framed that way, but that makes sense.
Could you put, and resourceful city where you could say natural built and social systems?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
creating a thriving community by leveraging, preserving the natural environment or something on the end.
Yeah,
Because I see what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, because how it lands on me, it doesn't immediately, the vision statement does not encapsulate environmental protection.
What about that? Creating a thriving community by preserving the natural environment.
I like that. I'm trying to.
I wouldn't go with preservation, I don't know.
I'm trying to
Protecting.
wordsmith that.
Like
This
it
is the
coexists.
granular Mike was talking about. What, Patrick?
Yeah, I
It
disagree.
lives in the coexists and the, I don't know, something like that. Just like we acknowledge the natural environment.
What I can do too, because I know we're almost at 8:00,
Yeah,
I can workshop the natural environment.
Sure.
I'd like to see how
part of
you
it.
massage that a little bit.
Something like, you know, I don't, not like necessarily to this, but like, within the bounds of.
In harmony with it.
In harmony, or within the bounds of, yeah, something like that, within the bounds of, I don't know what I was gonna say.
You bring up a good point, because sustainability, I've looked at different definitions, and some of them include things like the local economy could be sustainable in terms of
Right.
job sustain. Whereas if we say, you know, I'm thinking about dirt and trees here, you know, I'm thinking about air, I'm thinking about water. I would say this group is probably thinking about dirt,
Correct.
trees, air, and water. Not to discount that social systems, economic systems, all should have sustainability components and values to them. So I guess it's where, how all-encompassing do you want to be, or how earthy do we
So-
want to be?
The thing with the built-in social systems, where I'm coming from with
Yeah.
that one, is almost from a 180 of a lot of people. I think when they think of sustainability, the like eco nerds, they think of only natural environment.
Sure.
And there's so much more than that.
Sure,
They think of
yeah.
environmental injustice that's impacting people.
Building codes.
Like everything under the
Yeah.
sun can really impact
Yep.
sustainability for better or worse. So I sometimes have my people brain on when I think of sustainability, of like how are we reducing harm to humans, and also the natural environment. But I think you're totally right, that natural piece was missing from it.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously you're right to focus on all of the other social systems and everything else, but I think that, yeah, that also should be in there, because that's ultimately what we're striving for, healthy people and healthy environment, because they work synergistically, so.
Yeah, Mel, you can massage that, but I don't know if you could put like, where natural built and social systems.
Yeah, I think, just added it somewhere. I don't.
All words,
Yeah.
all words.
Yeah,
Yeah, you'll
yeah.
figure
Do
it
your
out,
thing.
yeah.
But
Any other
thanks for raising that.
things you all feel like is missing, wish was added?
Does, you say community, does that insinuate, you know, I think equity it's not explicitly stated, but does it need to be, you know, we often put on an equity lens when we're doing our policy work here. Is that reflected in this statement?
I like the word community, and we want to focus in on Englewood, right? Because it's a vision for Englewood. If you get too broad, then it just gets too much. But I like community because I was thinking of it for like the unhoused community, right? Like technically not resident, but still part of the community. I think it encompasses that. But that's where my brain went with it.
I like that.
Maybe this is nitpicking. I was thinking like some word to signal like interconnectedness or solidarity, like not that there's just like, you know, individual members that make up a community, but that people are kind of coming together and working together.
Like
That might be too much
interconnectedness
for
within
this.
Englewood.
Yeah. That might be getting in the weeds with this.
I can look at it though. I can look at seeing to.
Community benefit came to mind. I don't know if you could work that something like that, but for time's sake, I'll let you do your thing.
Any other comments?
Well, part of it is, are we stepping on your division
Right.
has every right to write your vision statement.
Yeah, no.
You know,
Everything is feedback and suggestions.
Oh, okay.
Which I love, that's why I present it to you
Okay.
all. I do agree, I think the natural environment piece is missing. Sometimes I come too strong, heavy with the people side, and I'm like, oh my gosh, why did I enter this field for the environment? So I'm definitely gonna take that into consideration while I work the vision.
Okay, cool. Back to boundaries and respect. I don't
Thank you, I
wanna,
appreciate that. No, this
Yeah.
is what I want, is the open
Okay.
dialogue of like, this is what I like, this is what I don't like.
I like how you have the word responsible in there.
Yeah.
That's nice.
It's very Englewood.
It's also, but the B and the I are flipped.
Responsible. But this, once it gets all finished and massaged, it's gonna go on the sustainability website. That's like a little work in progress probably for the next few months.
okay.
But it'll be on there. We also updated the sustainability website. I forgot to say this. We're trying to make it more user friendly. So we have it in a lens of like a resident, business, and internal government operations. So you can come with a better lens than just like a bunch of resources. But it's still in process. So if you look at it and you're like, I don't like it, it's getting changed, I promise. But yeah, anything else for sustainability?
Good.
Stuff?
This is good.
Yeah, I like that.
Good job.
Cool. Okay, the next thing is Sustainability Commission accomplishments, and one that can be added on now after tonight is that you guys voted on approving a tree protection ordinance. But with it being December, which I can't even believe,
I know.
I thought I would just rehash all the amazing things that the commission has done this year, because every time I do this, I love it. You all do too much. So the first one provided suggestions and recommendations for the sustainability plan update that happens every year. You guys always put in such good stuff that is put in the following updates, and I just really appreciate all the detail and time that you all put towards it. I think it's amazing. Provided feedback on 4 quarterly newsletters and caught all my typos, which I appreciate. Made multiple submissions into the Englewood magazine around sustainability topics, and I just think they look so amazing. You all reviewed and or approved the sustainability grant project and criteria for those for the grant, the greenhouse gas targets, the energy efficiency utility bill insert, gas stove ventilation flyer, which there are still some in the front, and those look awesome. The city turf map and conversion targets that we now have, the 2025 budget, and reviews from the results of the community sustainability survey. So you all had a lot of projects and stuff in front of you this year. The next one we already talked about. We sent a representative to the Front Range Sustainability Commission meetings, which is Mike, which someone probably will have to take over for him when he gets termed out.
Yep.
You guys held a volunteer event at Bard Park, which I feel like I'm missing in a volunteer event up there, but I could not find it. But you all did a volunteer event. You sent and presented a memo to council regarding native plant code change. And you received presentations from utilities about the city ditch update, Compost Colorado, Scott Wallace from Sage, which was last time, Evan Anderson on tree protection ordinances twice, Dr. Cog on their 200 million EPA grant, Samuel Bundrent from Trush, Aiden Lawton, our Green Business Program Coordinator, and the Regional Air Quality Council on anti-idling. That was your Spotify Wrapped for the commission.
Well, you know, what jumps out at me is that's a big step forward from where Keep Englewood Beautiful, KEB. And I'm not trashing KEB because that was a step. But one of the frustrations about KEB is we didn't sink our teeth into anything, and we were like, we're talking about stuff and we're picking up litter every now and then, but we aren't saying anything. And that's gratifying to say, well, we're making some noise and we're having some influence. And that was really right about the time you came on board was when we made that transition into the commission. So that feels good. That feels good.
Yeah, you all should feel awesome about it. I remember even last year when we were doing the Wrapped for the year, it was also equally amazing stuff. Like, you guys are a very active but like doer group of people, which is just so cool to be a part of.
Thanks for the nice words.
Yeah, of course. You guys are my extension of my division.
There you go. Well, cool. All right, let's roll.
All right, city updates. This will go by fast. The Fleet Zero grant that you all know that we were already awarded goes in front of City Council on the 16th. They have to approve it before we can move forward. Hopefully there will be no hiccups there. We have our waste summit with city council members. It's only for city council members from the 4 cities that are part of the waste characterization study, which I think everyone knows about. If not, flag and I can give a background on it. But that'll happen likely at the end of January, and essentially they get together. Our contractor will lead facilitation just around the information we found thus far from the study and kind of get their feedback on certain things. So I can give a debrief on that in the February meeting. I think it'll be very juicy. And then finally, the resiliency workshops, as everyone knows, they were rescheduled. We're still moving ahead with January. We're going to finalize our dates this week and send out to people. But yeah, those are our main big ones for city updates.
Great.
So now it's just January meeting topic ideas. The only one I have up there is I'm working on the 2024 sustainability report that goes in front of City Council. And every year we have a piece for the Sustainability Commission and all that they've accomplished. So everything that we talked about there, well, maybe not everything for Spacewise, majority of things that were in there will be in that report as well. So you all can review it at the January one to see if there's anything that you want changed, reflected for the commission.
I have an assignment for everyone. As I'm moving towards the exit door, it's kind of related to that, but I've had conversations with some or all of you at different times, hallway conversations that go, wouldn't it be cool if Englewood could do this? Or I heard of a city in Illinois that did that. We could never do that in Englewood. And then I read articles about some really crazy stuff. There's one company out there that has a complete water recycling system that when you build an apartment building, for example, it's 100% recycled water, and it's working. And you think, I wonder if Englewood would ever do anything like that. Or I wonder if the codes in Englewood would allow such a thing. So what I would like for the next meeting, and the assignment I would like all, and this is for fun, this isn't, you won't get a grade. But if we can all bring one wild and crazy idea in, it's like, why doesn't Englewood do that? Or is anybody even looking at that? And you might surprise yourself. You may come back with more than one, but I think it'd be kind of an interesting conversation. And we just go around and we say, well, I got 3, and I'm gonna rattle them. Logan's got 4, and just go and just see if any light bulbs go off. And then maybe, and again, it's a dreamer sheet. It's not something that we're demanding the city do next week. But I just think there's ideas out there that if we could throw it to the city and say, we think this is something you ought to look at. And I don't know exactly how you're gonna do it, but other cities are doing it. So is anybody at Englewood looking at this stuff? And I think that's something this group is charged to do.
For sure.
So again, we react to what city council asks us, and also we throw stuff back at them and say, yeah, but you didn't mention this, or what about what Fort Collins is doing? And I just think that'd be a fun conversation to see what people come up with, because there's a lot of creativity in this group. And the good news is you don't have to explain how to do it. You can say, have you thought about it?
But don't have me explain how
We'll
to
dump
do
it on your desk now. You figure out how to do it. But I just think that's how Englewood can.
I think that's a great idea, and I think it kind of brings like inspiration and energy into this space too.
Yeah.
And a fun way to start
Yeah, start the new year.
2024, I mean, 2025,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Love it.
So if that's a homework assignment, I'd ask you guys to do it. You don't have to spend hours. Just a couple bullet points and be willing to just throw it out there and say, I read this article, or I know this city's doing that, or why the heck doesn't Englewood do anything? And I just, when I talk to people, there's a lot of good ideas floating around out there. Maybe we could germinate some of those ideas, and maybe the city's already doing some of that. We don't know about it.
That'd be cool if we were doing some crazy ideas.
So can we put that on the agenda? Okay, I don't know what you call that
You're
now.
the boss, man. You
All right,
need to
put that thing
decide.
on the agenda. I demand it.
So I had an idea, like, I don't know if it'd be in future magazines or what, but I know that the Englewood magazine has shown like, I don't know, kind of like model citizens. I don't know if they've highlighted like business owners or other people. I don't know. Can't think of like specific examples. But in the future, if we could like have kind of like model sustainability citizens, like people who are taking care of their yards or whatever they're doing. I've just been thinking recently about like role models, like what gets people to change their behavior. Random thought.
We've flirted with this a little bit. And this was probably over a year ago that it was discussed. This commission used to judge Christmas lights.
Okay.
And so then they were in the city awards, a financial award to the most impressive ones. It's fun. We handed that off because the biggest, grandest Christmas light setup is not exactly sustainable.
Greg was like, what's going on?
Yeah. But in that same vein, we had the idea, well, what if we had a competition to highlight sustainability efforts around the city? And I like your idea a little bit more because we ran into this idea of, well, we can't exactly go on people's like private property and look at their composting systems or their native, their gardens and things like that. And so it got tabled. But I do love that idea.
I love that.
Even if it's just testimony and I don't know what the award could be, but I think we do a Englewood Citizen of the Year. Tease that down to just a sustainability award.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a brilliant idea. I'd like to explore it more. I just wanted to give some context that we have talked about something like that in the past.
One thing with the Sustainable Business Partnership Program is for the quarterly newsletters, we really want to, once it gets more people joined, to do highlight case studies and highlight business as part of it. But I can talk to Aiden and be like, what do you think about doing like this sustainability citizen, but also highlighting or having an award for a business?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that local movement would mean a lot
Yeah,
too.
that's a good idea.
I love the citizen award.
Well, just landscaping. I mean, I've seen people who've done a terrific job, low water landscaping, with or without help from the city. But I look at, wow, they put a lot of work in, it looks really nice. Just give them a pat on the back, say, thanks for demonstrating what it can look like.
We could even flesh out like a quarterly highlight.
Yeah.
Just something that someone in Englewood is doing that's cool with a picture and a testimony. I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's
Cool.
think more about that.
That's your wild, crazy idea?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anything else that you would like on the agenda for January?
That's a full meeting.
We might have a lot of fun and get off on crazy tangents, but that's okay. Maybe that'd be fun, this
good to talk.
sustainability tangents, you know, what could you imagine? And I read all kinds of crazy articles that just blow my mind of cities that are in crisis over water and some of the creative things they're doing to address it. Off-grid energy systems, and there's grant money for some of this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I just read an article, the farthest eastern city in the United States is in Maine, and it's an island just off the coast, and they've suffered for years from power outages and stuff with hurricanes. And what they've done is they put a combination of batteries, tidal generators, and solar panels, and they got government grants to do it. And so they have a backup system now that when the energy goes down for a day, they don't miss a beat on the island. And they're saying that will be replicable in other islands. And then you go, well, why don't you do that in Englewood? Because we're going to get snowstorms and forest fires and crazy things. And so I just gave you one of my ideas. So why doesn't Englewood look at something like that? Other cities are doing it, and I don't see the downside to it. So that's the kind of stuff that gets me fired up. I
love it.
Yeah.
Same here.
Okay.
Cool.
Anything else? Staff's choice. Well, Thoniel's not here, so he doesn't get to say anything.
The ghost of him.
Council
can't even speak.
liaison. If there's no further questions or business, I say let's adjourn. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Shelley and
Appreciate it.
Christina.